Last year on Netflix, the Cuphead show came out of nowhere and built up a loyal following, and although we're hoping for a season 4, nothing has been confirmed. The series style reflects a similar comedy style to the old rubber hose cartoons of the 30s and 40s. Not just slapstick, the show also has dark and adult humor. How far does this humor go? Let's take a look. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and these are the Cuphead show adult jokes, cleanest to dirtiest. Let's start with the immature jokes. They aren't really inappropriate, but just kind of fun for everyone. First, we have Soiled Pants. Ghost Ain't Real starts off with the Cup brothers leaving from seeing a scary movie, and Mugman stating how it wasn't as scary as he thought. Cuphead says, "I'm proud of you, Muggsy. You only needed to change your pants 3 times. And later in the episode, when the brothers split up, Mugman hopes ghosts aren't real because he's out of spare pants.
They better not be. I'm all out of spare pants.
We've all been scared, Mugman. Next is Milk. Cuphead and Mugman go searching in the woods for Baby Bottle. Well, what they think is Baby Bottle. In the episode, don't open the door, and come across a bear who had drunk the bottle of milk. The bear roars in their faces, and they just stand there in terror, while milk pours out from their straws. Does this remind you of anything? It's almost like the Cup brothers peed themselves in fear. But I mean, come on, that's pretty funny. Next is Divorce Arc. This comes from an argument Cuphead and Mugman had in the episode Baby Bottle. After getting locked out of the house by Baby Bottle, they start arguing about taking care of the kid, which leads to Mugman saying, "Cuphead, the way you're talking, it's like you never even wanted a baby." To which Cuphead replies that no, he didn't.
It's like you never even wanted a baby.
Now is complicated relationships. In the episode High Seas Adventure, Captain Brinybeard tries to win over Kala Maria's heart, yet she keeps trying to turn him into stone. Mugman tries to tell Brinybeard that Kala Maria wants him dead, to which Brinybeard replies, "Relationships are a series of peaks and valleys."
Relationships are a series of peaks and valleys.
Now we have Tear the Clothes Right Off of Ya. And Sweater Luck next time, while trying to cheer up the devil, Henchman brings up an ad about a new ride that will, quote, tear the clothes right off ya. An interesting idea for a ride. And at the end of the episode, Cuphead and Mugman get to ride it, and we see the aftermath. Though, luckily, they still had their underwear on. But Cuphead adds on to this. Even though he's talking about having Mugman as a brother, he says that he feels so much less exposed. And then we get the reveal that they're only in their shoes and underwear.
It really makes me feel so much less exposed.
And to end this section, we have Peter Griffin meme. There's a part in the episode, Say Cheese, that pays homage to a well-known Family Guy meme. Elder Kettle tries to tackle Cuphead and Mugman, who have his camera, but he misses and falls on the floor, limbs sprawled and back crooked. This looks similar to how Peter Griffin looks in the Peter falling down the stairs meme. Now we get to the more naughty jokes. These are more likely to fly over younger viewers' heads and touch on some adult topics. Starting off, we have Goggles. In Dangerous Mugman, when Cuphead tells Mugman that the Dirk Dangerous goggles had come off ages ago, Mugman thinks he lost the bravery he had when he wore them. However, he realizes that without the goggles, he still has the bravery. And he says, "You see, Cuphead, the goggles were inside me this whole time." And Cuphead responds, "Gross, but I see your point."
The goggles were inside me this whole time.
Next is Almost Swear. This is quick. In Sweater Luck next time, the devil goes to the cottage to get Cuphead to take off the sweater so he can take his soul. Cuphead tells the devil to meet him at the back door, and the devil replies with, "Listen, you little shoehorn," before getting the door slammed on his face.
Listen, you little shoehorn.
The devil definitely wanted to say something much less child-friendly than shoehorn, but you have to please the censors, so shoehorn it is. Next, we have the talk. Mugman is devastated with all of his and Cuphead's attempts to fix his broken handle and handle with care. So, Elder Kettle comes to cheer him up, though first asking Cuphead to give him and Mugman some privacy. He goes on to say, "Your bodies are changing." Mugman then looks up with a face of disgust.
Your bodies are going through changes.
A common response to the puberty conversation. Now we have the chair. Honestly, we don't know how this scene was okay to be in the show. Even though it's not dirty, it is pretty mature. Cuphead tries to escape the prison in Jailbroken and emerges out from the pipes thinking he escaped. Turns out he dug into the room with the electric chair, and the prison guard, with no change in facial expression, straps Cuphead in the chair. And while we don't see Cuphead getting shocked, it's very clear it happened. Next is Drinks on Me. In Down and Out, it takes place in a bar turned club where King Dice can perform. After King Dice tells the devil his plan to get Cuphead's soul by getting him to sign a contract, he heads over to Cuphead. Cuphead is sitting at a table with a group of background characters, telling stories, when he snaps his fingers and calls out, "Let's get another round over here."
Let's get another round over here, huh?
Cuphead most likely isn't old enough to be drinking alcohol, so it probably wasn't alcohol, but considering the setting they were in, it definitely sounded like calling a bartender to get more drinks. Finally for this section is Drunk on Water. Apparently to vegetables, water is the equivalent of alcohol. In Root Pact, when the Root Pack take over Elder Kettle's garden to throw a shindig, we see lots of partygoers filling up on water from the hose, even spraying it into each other's mouths, looking very similar to people in a speakeasy doing the same with alcohol. It's clear that this is the intent when Ollie Bulb is at the bar, hiccuping and speaking slightly slurred. He is clearly drunk. And finally, we have the adult section. These are the jokes that have adult implications that only older viewers will likely pick up. First, we have Seductive Cheese. As part of their plan to lure Werner Warman out of his mouse hole and rats all folks, Cuphead sticks Mugman's hand in a wedge of cheese. Cut to Werner sitting in his home. Mugman makes the cheese walk in with his fingers as legs and arms, as swanky music starts playing and Mugman doing high-pitched giggles. We know that mice love cheese, but we don't think they love them in that way. Next is Bush Slapped. While searching on his own, Cuphead is spooked by a bush and whacks it with his baseball bat, causing all the leaves to fall out. He apologizes, but then the bush gives him a big ol' slap on the face, leaving a nasty hand mark before pulling up its sleeves, as if it were pulling up a dress or a skirt. Maybe we're looking too deep, but this scenario feels similar to women slapping men who try to hit on them. Up next is Elder Kettle Still Got It. At the beginning of the episode, Day of Fun, Miss Chalice possesses Elder Kettle, causing him to do a bunch of wacky stuff. When she unpossesses him, and she and the Cup brothers leave, Elder Kettle gains consciousness and says this: "Waking up in the city with no memory how I got here, empty gas tank, money gone." Then with a smile, he says, "Kettle, you old rascal, you still got it."
Kettle, you old rascal, you still got it!
Not only is Elder Kettle thinking that he just experienced being blackout drunk, but implying that it happened a lot when he was younger. Not really something that should be considered a good thing. Next is Mugman's Fantasy. We basically have multiple moments during Mugman's Mugbeard Fantasy in The Ice Cream Man. First of all, Mugman is reading a romance novel, literally titled Romance on the High Seas. So you know things are gonna get romantic. When the book Sea Beast, substituted with Kala Maria, appears, she wings her wet hair, which splashes onto Mugbeard, and his reaction shows how enamored he is with her. Look at that face, he clearly enjoyed it. He also mentions at one point, burning passion. And now, while not necessarily an adult joke, but just how every time he's about to kiss her, he gets interrupted by the Ice Cream Man. It's probably something many people who daydream about their crushes have gone through.
Would you turn it off, please?
Now we're on the Big D, an innuendo made by the devil. When he introduces himself through his song in the first episode, he names some of his other names, including Old Scratch, Mr. S, and ending with the Big D. Obviously the D stands for devil, but older viewers might be filling in the blank a bit differently. Not to mention that right after, he calls himself a real naughty boy, with a seductive shoulder roll. And finally, we end with Take It Off. Multiple times in the episode, Sweater Off Dead, the devil tries to get Cuphead to take off the invisible sweater that's protecting him from the devil. He tries bribing Cuphead, saying, "Take it off and I'll give you $10.
Take it off and I'll give you $10.
Cuphead almost makes the deal when Mugman tells him that his soul is worth more than $10. And Cuphead replies, "Hey, you're right, make it 20. It makes sense in context, but you take it out and we have a very different conversation. The devil tries again later by pretending to be Quadratus and tells Cuphead to take it off. That would be much better. In general, the idea of getting Cuphead to take off the sweater is played in a way that's much more adult. Alright guys, that's it. Did you agree with our list? And were there any adult jokes we missed? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like our video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But most importantly, stay wicked.